morning, everyone. So my name is Liz Sheldon, and I head up the partnerships team at Pleo. And the topic on the screen today that we'll be discussing is how technology is a necessity to future-proof your clients' businesses. We all know that app advisory comes with the territory. You don't necessarily need to be a certified cloud champion to know that you need to champion tech. But do we consider the motives behind why we recommend a tool? Is this at the forefront of our minds when we're speaking with a client? Do we frame that effectively in a way that the client understands? Or could there be a confidence piece to be gained in hearing from leaders that do it successfully at scale? So joining us today, we have Lee Morn, CEO of a practice based in Cambridge called Green and Purple, and Charlie Robinson, who's UK MD of a financial management platform called Scale Up Finance. So welcome both this morning. Would be great to perhaps hear a little bit from both of you, if you could introduce yourselves, tell us a little bit about who you are, your background, and of course about your firms as well. So Charlie, let's maybe start with you.
Thanks, Liz. Great to be here with everyone. Bit about me, I had a couple of different iterations throughout my career over the last few years. So started off life as a bit of a failed entrepreneur, which was great. Learned loads. Then actually ran a youth organisation. Then spent almost a decade at PwC doing all sorts of things, from training to accountant, and following that, building out a lot of different propositions, working with SMEs and startups over that time. I jumped over to Scale Up Finance when I got the call, because I just saw that they were solving a huge problem that I thought was needed in the market at the time. Very early stage business at the time, and growing really, really quickly. So I jumped over to launch our UK office. Scale Up Finance, we are a company basically supercharging finance for startups and SMEs. We have a couple of different things that we do. So fundamentally, we have our own platform, as you alluded to there. We build technology which essentially gives companies access to their data far more effectively, far more beautifully, far more easily, by hooking up with their cloud accounting system and a lot of other systems, giving them lovely reporting. Alongside that, we also provide a service element to help companies, almost like CFO as a service, we call it, to help companies interpret that data, understand what they can do with it, how they should move forward, and also make sure that they've got the right stack underneath them, which can put that data together so that you can then report on it and sort of act more effectively. So that's us in a nutshell.
Nice, thanks. And I think, yeah, quite a unique positioning that you'll be able to speak on sort of both arenas of having that sort of service offering as like a sort of outsourced CFO, but equally having the tech backing and the management platform behind it as well. Thank you so much. Over to you, Lee. Again, same question, bit of a background about you, who you are, about Green and Purple, and what people can learn from you today.
Okay, thanks, Liz. And thanks for having me. So my background is trained as a chartered accountant at a regional practice. I then went to Deloitte. I was a director at Deloitte in Cambridge for 10 years. That meant I worked with all manner of startup businesses and funded vehicles, spinning out technology from the university typically. I then went into industry, was CFO of a growing solar development business, built 150 megawatts of solar farms in the east of England. And then 5 years ago, I joined Green and Purple when it was just 5 people. We're now 51, doing what we call CFO-led virtual finance teams. Again, typically working with seed and growth stage businesses, acting as their full stack finance team, outsourced to us, to the outside world. Nobody knows it's us. And that's what we're doing. But it's a relevant conversation, and I know we're going to talk about it lots, about what the app stack does and how it supports how we deliver our work going forward.
And I think particularly pertinent given the profile of the portfolio companies you look after as well, in that sort of seed scaling stage as well, and helping them future-proof for whatever's next. But no, thank you so much. Two, also worth mentioning, two very, very key successful Pleo partners of ours, as you can imagine. So very interested to dive into the topic. touching briefly on Pleo, I guess, but also to help set the scene for this morning is, yeah, we actually work with, over 1,000 different partners all over Europe, from accountants to CFO consultants to affiliate partners and tech partnerships. But this wasn't always the case. I was brought in 4 years ago now to actually help set up and establish the UK footprint. And while we had a really strong network of existing partners in Denmark, our UK partner channel was in its infancy. But where we actually saw this real sort of hockey stick growth and where our partner community really accelerated was throughout the pandemic years. And they were pretty successful years for Pleo, speaking honestly. It was where our outward perception pivoted away from, simply being seen as this cute, pink, fun card to actually a necessary solution that granted real-time access and visibility, real-time budgeting control in an area like expenses, which is notoriously a black box. And ever since then, I think, advising on technology, accountants having that tech fluency has become such a critical component of, a finance leader's skill set. I think we're always going to need accountants with, that best possible technical skill, but business leaders now do look for far more. They need, forward-looking strategic advisors with a blend of both finance, but also business skills. How to be these convincing communicators and being well-versed actually in knowing which tech is needed to survive and help your clients stay ahead of the curve. And when we embrace that technology, it has the potential to future-proof and help you navigate today's financial challenges. In my research and prep for this, there was a quote that I found quite interesting. It was taken from the recent ACCA report, and Mark Anderson, who's the SVP of Finance at HP, mentioning, I'm not looking for finance professionals who can simply predict the future. I'm looking, I've just said that wrong. I've just messed it up. I'm looking for finance professionals who can predict the future, not just describe history. That was an important quote to actually say correctly. But point being, it seems like now there's, an expectation that accounting professionals should be these sort of future-gazing advisors in order for them to successfully help their clients prepare this year. So much so that we should be able to help predict the future. So to kick us off, really, I guess, yeah, Charlie, maybe let's start with you. Are we there yet as an industry? Are we able to successfully help our clients navigate to the point where we are predicting the future effectively?
It's a big question, a very big question. Okay, so should I just give you a yes or a no? Is that the best answer? I think I think it's kind of fun, and I think when you're looking for individuals, fundamentally, I think most people have the capacity to operate in a way that that is needed from companies they work with at the moment. But it's right; it's really important right now to look at what's going on. I mean, it's always been important to look at what's going on, but the world is moving faster and the business environment is more challenging and people need more access to data, and therefore actually these skills are even more important. I think the like what we've seen with sort of technology that's enabling us to do certain things is it means that some of this stuff is easier, but also some of it is more difficult. So, an industry that we work in where we look at sort of more reporting, forecasting, budgeting, the more sort of FP&A side of things, it's still not there yet, right? Fundamentally, we're still not in the place where you can basically just ask a piece of technology like, what's going to happen to my business, or where am I going to be in 2 years' time? Like, there's a lot of input needed, and it's still quite imperfect, and we're also trying to solve that. But I think there is definitely a place for the historic stuff, like looking backwards, right? Fundamentally, looking backwards is actually really important when you're analyzing information, understanding what it is, but there's looking at it from a strategic angle as well, not just saying we've done this, I can sweep it under the carpet and let's go away. Now, obviously, we've got to do statutory accounts and all sorts of reporting, and that's a really important part of the market. However, when we're looking at stuff that is at the moment also less commoditized to some degree, it's about actually the more strategic analysis. What has happened? What can we infer from it? How can we use that to look into the future? And I think that comes through like an attitude within a company, like how do you actually perceive the role of finance? It comes into how you enable people, but with technology, and also like how you train people up as well.
And important, as you said, to acknowledge that it's not like we're scrapping away with the sort of historical reflective side of things. That's always going to remain and always be important to ensure that we know how best to learn from that. but it's
Of course.
also about, as you said, still looking forward as well and trying to get to as sort of future gazing a possibility as we can.
And any future looking activity, by the way, any future looking activity, forecasting, budgeting, whatever it might be, is always based on historical activity anyway. So you've got to have accurate historicals to know whether what I'm predicting that's going to happen tomorrow is going to be 100% increase, or is it actually going to be the consistent trend of what's been happening in this business today. Very
true. Lee, same question.
I think it's a great question. The short answer is no, we're not there yet. The future gazing for accountants, we naturally go to like forecasting and cash flow forecasting, and therefore people start thinking about apps to achieve those things and processes. In my mind, when you were sort of prefacing this, you talked about tech to survive and future proofing, and actually what I think is interesting there is Charlie's FP&A point, that the quality and the ability to forecast well on anything, whether or not it's cash flow, is the quality of the data that currently exists. And I think that's where we are making great improvements, is in the quality and reliability of the data that's currently being recorded, because that improves our ability to accurately forecast and accurately sort of future gaze. The reality is, we all know any budget or plan that we set is wrong immediately the second you've done it. But the ability to have more reliability or expectation around the shorter term it is fundamentally improving. We're just not yet there. We're not yet where we want to be with it. But yeah.
Which I guess just jumping on that, I think there's an interesting point around kind of the bookkeeping activities, the typically some of the most sort of foundational activities that are done in finance, like they are in a lot of ways becoming even more important, right? So we're looking at ways that we can make it more efficient and we can make it more automated, but also that data is being used in more ways to do more things, and therefore it's even more significant if that's not correct. So we see a lot of customers who come to us on day one who are not in a great state in terms of the quality of their existing data, and that's basically job one, because we can't, any reporting you put on top of that will be meaningless unless you have that really good data.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right. Accuracy used to be the 100% focus, and now not only do we need accuracy, but we need timeliness in order for us to do any of that forecasting, or at least attempt to do it at all well.
Yeah, the foundations have to be there, otherwise, don't run before you can walk, kind of thing. But I guess staying with you, Lee, on that point then. So with that in mind, how would you say that you've structured Green and Purple's business model to ensure that you are as future gazing and as accurate and have the kind of robust data to support your clients?
Yeah, so we're a team of 51 now, and what we do is actually 90% of our business is virtual finance teams, so being people's outsourced accounting solution. We replicate what you would get in industry, so everybody holds an industry role or equivalent role, and run all of the processes as if we're a true outsourced finance team. I think there's still all of the relevance and importance of having strategic tax planning and all of the traditional sort of advisory support, but for us it's about timeliness and relevance and quality of the data live, and so that's what we're aiming to be, is people's live finance teams delivering all of the things you'd expect from a live finance team week to week, day to day, rather than sort of after the fact driven by any sort of compliance deadline or anything.
And Charlie, same with you. So again, as I'd said already, a little bit more of a unique partner that we've got here, not necessarily like classing yourselves as an accountancy practice, of course, but again, how have you structured your business models internally?
Yeah, so I think we fundamentally have I'd almost see it as two sort of sides to our business. So on the one side, we have our smaller SME startups who generally lack in-house finance support that we support with our platform, but with our sort of CFO partners, plus potentially sort of general financial operations support alongside. And for us, that's about making sure that we work. Actually, we're unlike potentially many people listening to this call, we're not an accountancy practice. We don't do any of the sort of annual accounts, corporation tax, my options, or any tax credits. We generally don't do that support. But for us, it's much more about actually, and many of our customers still have that support externally. It's about how can we make sure that our customers have basically the right data that they need to make the right decisions in their business. And so for early stage businesses, it's very much more around providing them service support alongside a platform piece of technology, because it's almost impossible at the moment, and we've seen it with a lot of the sort of other platforms in the market for early stage businesses who have 100 different software tools already in their business, to spend another 100 hours trying to figure out how a potential finance tool is going to then contribute again to their business, and then sort of really commit to that, and then realize that they might have to shed it a few months later. So service side is really important to enable that. The other side of our business is really working with other finance professionals, in-house finance professionals, or financial consultants, accountants, whatever it might be, and providing them with the tools, effectively our platform, to enable them to deliver really quality management reporting to their customers, effectively, and people that they work with. And for in-house finance teams especially, a lot of this is stuck in Excel, it's stuck in a spreadsheet, which is should we say the best worst option, and it's got no audit or auditability, it's got no automatic integrations, it's got no error proofing. Like there's a lot of failures when it comes to Excel, and so that's how we work. But we're a team in the UK of about 25 people. We've got worldwide about 90 of us, and we obviously have our sort of tech people who work alongside our finance people who deliver it as well. So we have a bit of a merge between a classic tech-looking company, but also a finance company as well.
And I often hear there's such a sort of enamored view of using Excel, which I get. Like, I love Excel at the best of times as well, but maybe it's, at this point in time of what we're needing, it sort of hits a ceiling a bit. It's not as dynamic as what is needed, of course.
And we're seeing with the whole finance technology stack that Excel has a place in areas, but specific tools designed for the purpose will always win, as long as they're of the right quality, operating in the right way. And there's a number of areas, and we've seen, right, whether it's payments, or whether it's sort of the sort of accounting system, right? Like a lot of people, I still meet people who are trying to do their accounting system effectively in Excel, and most people would probably laugh at that now, right? It's like, you don't keep a set of accounts basically in Excel, like you keep it on an accounting system. There's plenty of accessible, very easy accounting systems, and we're seeing that these tools will offer much more than Excel, but you have to get to the point where the tool is really useful. And number two, you have to make sure that it's really easy to use, because people have thousands of hours of experience in Excel, and so Excel feels the easy option otherwise.
And staying with that, you've obviously brought up, the tech stack and analyzing clients' app stacks, etc. How would you say at Scale Up Finance that you are approaching app advisory? Bit of a buzz term these days, of course. It's thrown around quite a lot, perhaps loosely. But what does that term mean to you, to your team, to your clients?
Yeah, for sure. And I guess it's a good term. Like we never have used that term per se, like app advisory in the business. But I really see sort of where it comes into play. And for us, it's really about enabling our customers to what I said earlier about enabling that data layer, and also taking the headache away of sort of financial operations. It's about saying, right, how can we set this customer, this client up for success? How can we make sure that they end up with the outcomes that they need, that will fundamentally build and scale that business over the long run? So it's about saying, right, we actually have a tech stack that we know works pretty well for 90% of businesses, or 90% of businesses in a certain sector or area. Let's use that. Let's tailor it if we need to for this customer's specific needs, and try and sew as much of that together as possible to eliminate error, eliminate unnecessary workload, whatever it might be. And then we'll come in and fill the gaps and work neatly alongside that technology. So, almost like a cyborg kind of situation, right? It's like, actually, how can you augment both human capital, both hours from people, but utilizing technology to get the most out of it? So for us, we know that most of our customers don't want huge transformation projects. Like, it used to be cool back when you used to get a transformation project from like IBM or Cisco or wherever it might be, but it's seen as like expensive and time consuming and not that cool, and no one wants to make a big change nowadays. They just want to get on with running their business. So how can we make in as streamlined a way as possible without too much disruption? How can we get in the right technology to really support companies we work with?
And you've mentioned a little bit around having that kind of sector personalized approach. And Lee, yeah, I think you've, in knowing your portfolio, you've got a little bit more of that sort of biotech angle that shines through in your client base. But again, same question, how are you guys approaching app advisory at Green and Purple? And again, how do you kind of implement and approach that as a topic?
Yeah, it's really similar actually. So we're reviewing people's tech stack when they come to us as a new client, and we've taken a view that rather than be sort of advisors that are looking at the market and saying here's a number of things that can achieve an objective, what we've done is we've chosen what we think is best in breed, or the tech stack that suits the vertical as well as possible, and then we're applying it absolutely across all of the clients in that sector. So whether it's tech, whether it's creative, or whether it's life sciences, we've chosen a set of tools that we think work best for those clients. And I think it's really interesting, Charlie's point around efficiency. That's a lot of the reason that we do this, is because we want the team to be as efficient as possible, to be doing the work that they should be doing. And that is about leveraging the technology to achieve as many tasks as they can, so that they can be spending as much time either talking to the client about their business, or doing higher value work that, well, for one, it's just way more interesting for them to do.
And yeah, higher value add-in work for your teams will naturally sort of translate into higher engagement scores. And again, I've seen both of your practices scale considerably when it comes to kind of hiring headcount, which is really cool to see. But I guess conscious as well that, we're going to have an audience that's going to be quite varied from various size and stature, different firms. So with both of yours being, I'd argue, similar sort of stature, what advice might you give to accountants that are trying to introduce tech for the first time, but with clients that are legacy and they've been working with for years? Because arguably you can say that, as part of that onboarding process, it's going to be slightly easier, that sort of reception, when they're already in that change mindset of working with a new accountancy firm, perhaps adopting the new tech and kind of getting on board with the tone that you're setting of, this is how we work, we're quite rigid, this is the app stack we promote. What advice would you give therefore to client accountants that are trying to activate and have that change mindset for clients that they've actually been working with for years? Either of you, actually. I didn't select a name, so Charlie.
I'm happy to do it. So I guess there's a couple of things that I think, like, as a practice, as business owners, if you're the owner of accountancy practice, if you have some sort of finance business, you've got to also be true to yourself, I think, to some degree. So I've worked with a lot of entrepreneurs over the past sort of 10, 15 years, and like a lot of time I say to them when they're struggling to make a decision about external investment or some other terms or whatever it might be, it's like, what do you want? Like, this is down to you. There's no right answer here. You can grow the business to 100 million, or you can try to, or you can grow the business to 10 million or 5 million and have a nice lifestyle business. Like, there's no right answer here. Like, there might be something promoted on social media, but you've got to do what's sort of true to you and what you actually want to do to live your life. And I think it's true in this respect, which is you don't have to just go around trying to throw apps into companies for the sake of it. Firstly, you have to decide like what's right for you and your business, and what do you focus on, and what do you excel on, what activities are they, and what could help you. But I think it's always been about the same thing, which is solving problems, right? Solving customers' problems, and that's what we as companies are here to do. We're here to solve the problems of our customers. So we don't want to go around, I mean, as us anyway, we don't want to go around throwing useless tools into companies for no reasons. We want to find processes, find difficulties, find issues where we really believe that this will be the best process. And if it's not, then let's utilize a human or some other simple sort of tool or a pen and paper and solve a problem in a more simple way. Like, people want their problem solved. So how do you do that with existing sort of client base? Well, I think you obviously have to approach it a bit more sensitively. People have come to you with on a certain expectation, and maybe you're changing the expectation of what it is. But if you're really being sort of true to yourself in that, I think it's okay to go down that path. I think it's about saying, look, we're going to have customers who are going to be leaving us because of this. I came across a customer the other day who said, hey, my accountant only just told me about Pleo. actually, as an example, of quite fun. No, I'm not just saying that because we're on this call, but like, they just told me about Pleo, and I didn't really even realize you could do like automated expenses. And they're like, what else am I missing out on? And I think that knowledge, that experience with their existing accountant has kind of has shaken them a little bit. And now they're saying, actually, what else don't I know? They're questioning kind of everything. And so it's just making sure that you are preventing a future loss of your customers, but also thinking about how can we help them maybe with services that we didn't realize we could do or that was needed previously. And that has to be done, yes, case by case, but sort of being true to yourself. So I haven't given, I guess, any very specific advice there, and maybe Lee can help a little bit on that. But like, I think it's just important from that angle to make sure that's the baseline you're working from. Lee, what do you have to add?
Well, so I think it's fundamentally an investment in quality of information conversation. So you started all of this, Liz, by talking about people wanting this future gazing advisor rather than a backward looking accountant, and that there's a really simple correlation there between investing time and money fundamentally in improving the quality of the processes, quality of the systems that sit around it, and those things improve the quality of the outputs. That is a tough conversation, but for me, I mean, if I was to give a tiny piece of advice, it would be around the sector focus and having breaking it down. Is always, I mean, these things are always easier if you just make them into more manageable chunks. So identifying 5 clients that you could roll something out to who would all see an immediate benefit, and almost doing it as a peer group, and people being able to share that information and share the benefits. I think my experience is that most people, even if they are reticent about doing these things, once you get them through the door, suddenly go, oh, why have I not, to Charlie's point, like, why did I not know about Pleo? Why did I not know about this? And if they are still reticent afterwards, there's bigger problems about what they're going to achieve longer term. I would say I think there's really fundamental challenges that will come up against.
I actually just picking up on that as well. I think it's so important to make sure that you properly understand the tech that you're talking about. So the you or your team or people within your team really understand it, because it's there's a lot of tech that feels unnecessary on the surface, I think, when you just look at it high level. But when you really understand and get into what it can do and how it operates, you realize some of the problems that it solves and what it takes out of the process. So like with Pleo, you can, I mean, a lot of companies say, well, people just get a receipt and they photocopy it and they submit it to us, and we'll just pay them through like some other expense platform. And we'll just reimburse them through Xero or through our bank or whatever it might be. And then you're like, well, but actually, do you really understand what you can do as part of Pleo? Like how it operates, the information flows, like what can be automatically reconciled, what kind of permissions you can set, like the approval process that you can put in place. Like, when you start to actually dig into it, and this is the same for every piece of technology, that's the bit where you can, firstly, you seem a lot more credible, but secondly, I think it becomes more obvious to someone why they should be working with a certain tool set, rather than actually just continuing on the status quo that seems maybe cheaper because they don't have to pay a regular cost, even though probably in the long run it's not cheaper. And it also just seems like easier because they don't have to change.
I think it's
and I touched.
Sorry, Liz. I think it's a really interesting point, because we use all of our tech stack internally, all of it, like complete. So new team members join and we give them Pleo cards, and they're like, what is this? And where they've not experienced that sort of stuff before, like our reporting is, we use Fathom internally and externally. There's a whole, so there's just so much more credibility when they can go, yeah, well, that's what we do internally, that's what we use, like, and the depth of understanding of how it works is way better than whatever training courses they might have been on. I think it's not just a thing to sell. It's like these are actually usable tools. Use them.
And that first-hand experience. So as you said, having that personal aha moment, if you're using the tools internally, is also going to help support. And I touched on this briefly at the start in, how do we be effective communicators? How do we be credible communicators? We're not just stuck behind spreadsheets or laptops anymore. We've got to be out and about, front-facing, client-facing, strategic advisors, and being able to sort of navigate an app landscape that, as we know, is getting noisier and busier year by year, and interpret these apps and distill them in a way that ultimately the client's going to comprehend and think, actually, that should be on my agenda to get on board with. But I guess linked with that is, there's so much more to navigate today than there was 5 years ago. And I think where we've seen partners be most successful is where we, notice that implementation is really a narrative, or it's a real culture of the business, and it's something that they really work to cultivate. So I'd love to hear also from your sides, how do you ensure that your teams are also taking that accountability and staying up to date and cultivating that culture of almost like curiosity, I guess. Charlie?
Yeah, for us, it's actually pretty simple. Like, we don't need to put in certain training programs or anything like that, even though we do this sort of stuff and it's important. I think the biggest thing comes down to empowerment and empowering our team to actually take the initiative when they see something. Fundamentally, the CEO, or if you've got a head of training or development or a head of technology or whatever it might be, they're one person or two people or whatever it might be, and they can only do so much. And you can try and constantly scour the internet and all sorts of stuff, but actually some of the most interesting tools and pieces of tech that we've come across have been when you're out and about, or you see something marketed on LinkedIn, or you're at an event, and your team will be seeing this all the time. Whether you're 2 people, 10 people, 100 people, you'll have so many more eyes in the market. And for us, it's about making sure that, as any good entrepreneur would do, you don't just look at it and say, oh, that's an annoying problem, and maybe it should be solved, or that's an interesting solution, and oh, that's quite nice, and then forget about it and go have dinner. It's about saying, okay, no, everyone's responsible here. Pick it up, come present it to the team. Let's listen to it. Let's explore it. Let's investigate it. See if it can provide value, and actually making sure that that you empower people. Firstly, hire the right people who are keen and kind of curious and want to actually move things forward, and then enabling them to be able to share that and implement things and suggest things and say, you know what, when you contribute something, it's going to have an impact, and we're probably going to implement it if it's a good solution, and we're going to ask our clients to use it. That for us has been one of the most successful ways of just staying current and staying on top of what's going on in the market.
And do you have formalized settings in which they can bring that forward, or is there a Slack channel, or how do you kind of ensure that it's permeated throughout the organization so they've got that opportunity to voice it through?
Loads of ways. So look, we're quite fortunate at the moment. We're not 1,000 people. We all sit pretty close to each other. No one's in a separate office. Everyone sits on the floor next to each other. And so we also have a strong office culture at the moment as well, which is just one way of doing it. And so for us, and that works really well, it means people are around each other and people talk, and there's much more sort of serendipity and conversations, etc. that happens. So for us, that's a big part of it. Yes, we have Slack channels as well that help as part of it. We also have various meeting structures, whether it's sort of retrospectives and sharings on things that happened in the business and what could be better and what we should look for, or sort of other meetings. But I think it's a cultural thing. It's like, how much do you encourage when someone comes to you and talks about something? How curious are you? Do you as a leader just say, oh, that's nice, and move on? Or do you actually say, I heard you mention that thing. And when a leader's coming over and to someone in the business and actually says, I just mentioned something really interesting. It's not necessarily in my remit, even though everything's in my remit as part of the business, but it's saying, tell me more about it, because it sounded really interesting. I heard someone had a problem with something the other day. Can you just tell me a bit more, write something for me? Actually, I want you to write just a 1-page little proposal, and let's send it around to the whole team just to see what they think. That kind of empowerment goes a huge way with people.
I think that's 100% right, that encouraging the curiosity of individuals and praising it, or just even if the outcome isn't necessarily require a change, it's about encouraging that cultural interest and natural sort of intrigue in things, and a bunch of that will come from just whatever they're being exposed to, but also it naturally breeds itself. If somebody says, oh, have you seen, oh, that's interesting, that's similar to this other thing I saw, and those are the really interesting conversations, aren't they? From my perspective, the thing that's interesting here was, as we scaled, we found that we were doing less of that. So what we've done is broken the team down into pod structures, and those pods do some of that information sharing, because we find that it's hard to share beyond sort of 20 people, having an open conversation gets harder and harder. And also culturally, it's harder to, especially, this is just the reality of life, it's harder for people who have less experience or are newer to the team to go, I've got a great idea, because it's just a harder thing to do, isn't it? So those pod structures, they have their monthly catch-ups where they're information sharing, and it will be down to what groups of clients they've got in that pod or whatever. So they might well be having different training sessions, but they'll then still be talking across different like grading levels that we've got. So then there's still sharing of information going both ways, going within those smaller groups, going within those client groups. So that's how we approach it. Is and I mean, with all sorts of, I'll throw other words in there, like, so we try and encourage people to do little Loom videos, just to like, here's a taster of something I've seen. Some people really engage with it, some people don't. Tech Slack channel is just really easy way of, I'm slightly notorious at saying, I've seen this thing, I've got no time to look at it, can somebody have a like investigate? But it encourages people to just put suggestions in and try and change things rather than just stick with the answer that we've currently got.
And I think that tone is so important to come from the top, right? But then it has to be sort of carried through and embodied with the rest of the org. And as you said, if you're sort of identifying, highlighting different tech you don't have time for, but it then creates a space for someone to step into that and say, I'm going to take charge and I'm going to lean into it and I'm going to try and investigate a little bit. And I love that, because it's certainly, an ethos that I equally have to really promote for and look for when hiring candidates, because Pleo is a tool that innovates every week. I can't keep up. You have to be the sort of type that is naturally geeky and curious and wants to kind of upskill, and hopefully that sort of permeates throughout the org and the rest of the team. But getting into, I guess, more around like the tech side of things, and I guess like future proofing, which of course is the topic that we're trying to chat through today. Do you have case study examples where introducing a client to a piece of tech has had that transformational impact on their operations and helping safeguard them for the future? Maybe Lee, will stay with you.
Is this the point at which I should do a sort of Pleo example?
So please don't, because it's going to turn into this weird pitch, and I'm not paying them to say
Pleo
any
is
of
wonderful.
this.
Excellent. We love Pleo.
Stop, guys.
Okay, I won't do that. I'll do a different example. So we picked up a client last September, I think it was, funded vehicle. They had lost their FD and wanted to outsource the whole finance team to us. But what they really cared about in the end, it turned out, was board felt like they didn't get enough information, didn't get enough data in a really usable way. So all of the standard stuff was being done, but none of the sort of and this is really silly, because the data was there, but it was how pictorially do you present it to people? What story are you telling? And so the tool that we're using there is Fathom, to do a bunch of great, like, here's what the trajectory looks like, here's what the cadence looks like, here's what, and also I am a bit of a fanboy for it, because I love it, because it pulls together non-financial information. And so you pull this away from being just a P&L and balance sheet and the reports that sit around it, but actually like, well, what's our pipeline look like? What's the cadence look like in the pipeline? That's the stuff that really gets people interested. That was a great success story where really the data existed. It was just about the presentation and format of it. Really transformational.
And actually building on that, which is interesting. Actually, there's a lot of similar use cases that people use our platform for. And I was talking to a couple of more property management companies over the last couple of months, and there's one who was just really interested to be able to see a bit more. It was actually a finance director in a company, and he had a reasonably good hold on everything, because it wasn't a huge company, sort of single-digit million revenues. They had I'm not sure, double-digit amount of sites, and so he pretty much knew what was going on in most sites. But actually, when he started digging down into the data of seeing the correlation between certain things, of saying, okay, actually, what would be quite interesting to see is how does my gas bill and my sort of utilities correspond with each of my different sort of tenants and sort of how does that play together, and also the rent that they're holding, and then also the vacancy periods on the back of that. Actually, this is stuff that, yes, I know pretty much my occupancy in every building, and I know pretty much how much everyone's paying, and I understand my rough costs for every building, but I'm not necessarily able to drill down to that level. Also, I know that as my business grows, I'm not going to have everything to the front of my mind, because I can keep a track of 10 buildings, but I can't keep a track of 25 plus buildings and knowing exactly what's going on. And also, more importantly, having all that information ready historically for a sale. For example, if I want to go through that in the future, that's going to be super important, because it's all well and good me knowing it and getting the business to 20 million. But then I need to be able to show a buyer that this business can go to 100 million. And I can't do that if I don't have the historic information. So that has been, actually, it's not crazy complex data, but it's bringing that all together in a very simple way to mean that you don't have to spend 3 people's worth of time doing that on a regular basis.
No, certainly a theme that we hear a lot is how do you achieve more of that helicopter view, a holistic picture as to what's going on. Conscious of time slightly, we do have a couple of questions that are coming through on the Q&A, so I'm going to slightly segue in towards these now. One question that's come through, so what are some of like the biggest gaps that you see in your clients' tech stacks? Lee, Charlie.
Go Lee.
So when people first come to us, it amazes me how much time people are spending, senior people are spending, either doing approvals or doing payments and, processing items, that it's just, and that's about control. We all understand that. But again, it's people not realizing that you're applying some apps in there and you end up with the same level of control. But what you've done is shifted a whole bunch of time from somebody very important to the business, either to us or to somebody else in the business. Just simple layering of approvals, and actually that changes business culture quite often to being people feeling empowered about their ownership around a budget where they didn't have it before. So that it's actually those really early pieces that we're seeing as like big gaps really quickly.
That's quite nice in terms of quick wins. So for what you're saying, it's more so the simple end of the scale. So that's reassuring in a way.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of I see it in buckets of like accounting system, payments, payroll, reporting. There are all these sort of gaps that usually are pretty huge, but actually quite interesting. I won't keep banging on about our sort of reporting side of it, but actually one slightly adjacent gap is, I think payroll is really interesting. Because I think payroll is at the moment going through a bit of a disruption, but I think it's ripe for a lot more disruption at the moment. So I think eventually, not yet, but gone will be the days that you will just send some information to someone and they'll send you back this spreadsheet that you then have to upload it to your bank, and then sort of pay slips and stuff is done separately, and it's all a bit of a mess in a black box. Eventually, and we're using technology that at the moment sort of is already doing this, but there'll be a lot more companies coming out, I'm sure. You have a platform that you can access, that you can manage, that someone can help you operate, but that fundamentally brings everything together, syncs automatically with the relevant authorities, and also gives your employees access to the data that they need when they need it as well. And I think payroll is a big one that people think is working okay, but actually they don't realize the amount of benefits that they can get through moving forward into something more automated.
I think that's a really interesting one, because we're seeing loads of that movement from thinking of payroll just as being pay slips to being what's the onboarding process look like, what's any of their access to training look like, and those are the really interesting providers in that space. Yeah,
maybe space for one more. We're slightly at time, but we're having quite a busy Q&A here. So what advice might you give to a business that is hesitant to invest in new tech and pushing back on price?
I mean, go on, Lee.
Go on. The honest answer, I mean, we sort of touched on it earlier about trying to get people to understand that you need to invest something to get something better quality out. The real answer that we've done a few times is actually just said, well, we'll back ourselves then. So we'll do some of this on risk. We'll say, here, let's test this for a couple of months, and we'll show you that there's time saving, there's some efficiency. If it's a client you really want to be involved with and be along the journey with them, then I think sometimes doing some of that just shows that you're really in it and you really back it. There's a whole bunch of confidence that was required to do those things, but that's what we've done in the past, is said, right, if you really, really don't want to spend £75 a month, we'll do it for 3 months and we'll show you why this is a benefit.
Love that. Proof of concept.
Yeah.
And I guess just quickly added as well, like I think with all these, this is about sales to some extent. Like, sales always feels like a dirty word, especially I think to people in the finance profession more than any other profession. But it is sales is really important. Fundamentally, you're selling something, even if you're not getting directly money from it yourselves. Like, it is a sell to a business explaining why this is important. And I think you have to dig into what are the pains of the person that you're speaking to, what's actually affecting them, because no doubt this will come back to them at some point in some way, even if it's not them doing the underlying payroll processing and you want to implement some piece of payroll tech and they're like, well, I don't care, it's working fine at the moment and I don't want to spend any more money. It's about saying, well, actually work it through and saying, well, what do you care about? You care about maybe retention. Your finance manager is going to leave if you don't start doing this stuff because they're sick of working in a business that doesn't want to change, or is it that actually the cost of doing this in the long run in terms of the revenue that you can get or the churn that you'll have in the business or whatever it might be, if you don't do some of this stuff, you will pay the consequences at some point. Because again, we're not implementing stuff for the sake of implementing stuff. We're implementing it because it's going to be better for your business and move something forward. And paying a few £100s a month for most businesses, which is kind of the cost of most of their tech stack, is going to yield huge dividends for you in these kind of rewards.
Yeah, love it. Good, strong note to end on there. We have gone just slightly over, but good debate there from the two of you. I do want to say thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to chat with you both, and I'm sure the audience here has learned an awful lot from the two of you and your sage wisdom. Oh, that's my cue to leave, basically. I've been talking too much now, but thank you so much for everyone for dialing in. The recording will be shared. There'll be an email sent through to those that have dialed in, and even those that weren't able to attend live today. And of course, if you want to learn a little bit more about both Lee and Charlie, obviously, I'm sure you can find them on LinkedIn, and equally with Pleo, pleo.io/partners, if you want to find out a little bit more about our partner program. But thank you so much. Having a wonderful Wednesday. Thank you once again, Lee and Charlie. It's been great to chat with you today.
Thanks so much.
It's
Take
been
care.
great fun. Thanks, Liz.
Take care. Bye.